Michelle. I'm the CEO of AdBot. For you guys who don't know AdBot, we are an ad tech startup and we automate Google Ads so that you can focus on your business rather than having to do Google Ads. We work specifically with businesses, startups in pre-seed and seed, as well as small businesses, right? So that's kind of like who we are and where we're at. Yeah, so I think Oliver mentioned it before. When I was asked to talk about the story and how I got to scale the business, I thought back to the first to Africa Arena, and what I really found amazing about Africa Arena and something that I took back with me was like practical advice from founders and entrepreneurs. And instead of telling you like this amazing inspirational story, I'm just going to talk about practical advice that you guys can use to implement in your businesses. So just how many of you prefer practical? Yeah, okay, great. So we're on the same page here. Brilliant. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to start off with is to tell you about the most important graph and the most important principle that you will ever need to know in startups. This is really, really important. You guys ready? Okay, here we go. Uh-oh.
All right, today we're going to talk about how we can find out and how much we can find out and what it takes to get there. So first we have to decide how much do we want to find out. So let's say in this case, I want to find out at a level of 7. Okay, so I find that level on my graph and I come horizontally to my gradient line. Where it intersects with my gradient line, I'm going to come straight down to where it intersects with my fuck around line. That there is going to tell me how much I have to fuck around to find out what I need to find out. See, as you can see, the more you fuck around, the more you're going to find out. And also, if you stay down here and you never fuck around, you'll never find out. So I hope this lesson is helpful. Thank you.
Right? Okay, so that is the most important lesson for a startup. So my presentation is all about, sorry, Africa Arena, fuck around and find out. It's the only way that you can grow. Okay, so before we start, I just want to talk about this word traction. I really, really love this quote from the founder of AngelList that says, traction is the quantitative evidence of customer demand, right? And I think that's the most important thing. A startup isn't really a startup or isn't really seen as scaling or getting traction if they don't have customers. Customers is really the most important thing because they're the guys that give us the cash. But also when we have customers, we have reason for some investors to give us money, right? So traction means growing, it means customers, and this word traction is kind of like what we're going to talk about today. How do we get traction within a startup? And it's it's really kind of like interesting. A lot of like developers. Specifically, if you're a founder and you development background, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to focus on the product, right? So a lot of guys, when they do their startups, they trying to like, if I just make this one thing work or this one feature go live, customers are going to come. Or I just need to make this UX work, and then the customers are going to come. Guys, the customers are never going to come. You have to go and find them. So getting customers is really like when you start getting some seed money in or some money in from investors or some of your own money, the most important kind of like share is trying to get customers. Yes, you need a product. Yes, you need a viable product, but that product doesn't have to be perfect. You need to show customers in order to show growth. The founder of Y Combinator actually said once that a startup is a business that can grow quickly. That's his definition of a startup. So if your business can't grow quickly, you might not fall within that definition of a startup. Right, so just also a little disclaimer. I thought my presentation was this afternoon and not this morning, so I have very manual notes that I'm going to reference, so just be patient with me. But yeah, so the point that I want to make here on the slide is that every failed startup has got a product, right? What a failed startup doesn't have is enough customers. Does that make sense? Right? So focus on your product for sure, but your biggest focus should be on customers. So how did we do it at AdBot, right? I'm going to take you through some really kind of like practical stuff. I'm going to show you like our measuring and our forms. But before we go into that, the first thing I did is I ran out and I got this book from Gabriel Weinberg and Justin Mayes called Traction, right? And what's really great about this book is that it gives you kind of like a bit of a formula in which you can fuck around with, right? So fucking around and not having a structure means you're just kind of like flailing, right? So it's really important to have a structure to what it is that you do. Okay? So in the book, the first thing that they share is that there is 19 channels that you can use to get traction, to get customers, right? And I want to spend a little bit of time on this because I think each one of the startups that start out are channel biased. So to give you an example, my background is digital marketing. So for 15 years, I thought, you know, digital marketing is the channel to do it. So I started my startup and I said, this is easy peasy. All I have to do, get the product out there, start putting money behind digital channels, and it would be great. Didn't work. 1 year later, 3 million run down, didn't work. Had to find other channels. And that's just an example of being biased towards channels. And what I didn't do is I didn't explore unconventional PR, which is really, really a very interesting thing. And what's really interesting is that unconventional PR actually worked a lot better than Facebook advertising or social media advertising, which is really great for us. And we know that now. But for you guys, you have to, for those of you who are in this process of gaining traction, the journey is to test each one of these channels and make sure that you find where your traction is. So how do you do that? Right? So there's a bit of a formula on how to do that. There are 19 channels. So what we've done, and I'm just going to give you our experience, is we use Monday as our operation system. And in Monday, we have a traction plan. And in the traction plan, we've broken down all 19 of the different channels. What we then do once a quarter is we sit down and we brainstorm each one of the channels. And that's because we're very biased. We're all very biased when it comes to a channel. Like I said, for us, digital marketing was the thing, but it's actually not where our customers are. Our customers are in markets, in all sorts, so activation is a little bit different. So yeah, so we first brainstorm. Then what we do is we rank. So we have a column, there's like 3 columns, and what we do is we rank in a circle. This might not work, and this is a far-fetched idea. And we split it out into the different channels. Then we prioritize, so which one we think is going to work best and where we're going to focus our attention, and then we test. And test and test and test is the most important. I know you guys are testing a lot on your product development, so you create new product feature, you put that in front of customers, you test and test and test, and you have to do the same with marketing. I think a lot don't realize the importance of testing your marketing. You kind of like put it out there and you're like, that's not as important as my product, and that's where we make a massive mistake. And then repeat, right? So every quarter we go through the same process, we review the numbers, and we go through it over and over again. And what's really interesting is that when we started out pre-seed, the channels that worked for us in the beginning were not the channels that's working for us right now. And you don't know that if you're not constantly testing those channels. And if you're constantly testing, you'll be able to realize which ones are not working faster, and you'll be able to move that to a different channel. Right, so this is kind of like what our traction board looks like, and you'll see We've got viral marketing, PR, unconventional PR, PPC, search engine, social media, online ads, content marketing, email marketing, engineering marketing, targeting, blogs, business development, sales, affiliate programs, existing platforms, trade shows, offline events, speaking events, community building. Which one of you has got an activity in every one of those sections? Not one. And this is what I'm talking about, right? So we're a little bit biased, and therefore we're blind to what opportunities are out there. Let me give you an example. Unconventional PR. You'll see next to it, it says cookies, right? So I thought, for a lach, what we'll do is we're going to bake cookies, and we're going to do a 3D print, and we're going to put our message on a cookie, right? So we go to markets, and we hand out our biscuits to say, this is what we do. We help businesses like yourself advertise on Google. Here is our business card, and we hand them the cookies. And that blew absolutely up like crazy. People were photographing the cookies, putting it on social media. People were coming to our website, signing up. And the reality is a cookie cost us 15 Rand a cookie, but our campaigns on Facebook and on Google was costing us up to 150,000 Rand. So again, just to point out and give you some advice on exactly what, where the magic could be. Engine optimization, everybody knows about that. I think most of the startups are into that. Another one that I want to kind of like talk about is offline ads. Again, I was very biased about offline ads. Digital is kind of like my vibe. But we've just recently, with trackers, started doing some billboard advertising. In Johannesburg, you guys saw Pineapple's billboard campaign, really exciting. The reality is your clients are not just in front of their screen. They're driving to work, they're driving back. So again, don't be kind of like blocked by your bias. Make sure that you're exploring in each one of those sectors. Offline events, speaking events, and community building, those are like really important as well. We could see in our kind of like business about what it is that we do, how we can help. Not only do we actually help startups moving from pre-seed to seed, we're actually kind of like getting our business out there, which is really great. So just to show you a little bit more on how that works. So in each category, we'll have 3 or 4 ideas. The top 3 are the ones that we'll focus on. This was last year. But the most important part is the part on this side, right? Which is your numbers. So every time you do a campaign, you have to measure like, what is the traction? What is the feedback that we got? So in our case, what we look at is, we look at traffic, we look at how many people clicked on it or engaged with it, how many conversions there were, how many leads was generated, and then it's all kind of like in one space. What we're able to see is that certain channels influence other channels, right? So for example, one of the things that we discovered, that better? So one of the things that we discovered is that with outdoor media, we could see the minute the outdoor media was up, people were searching our brand a little bit more, and therefore we got a lot more conversions. When we removed the outdoor media, we just saw kind of like our search going back to baseline. So, so this format is really, really important. You could do it on Excel spreadsheets. I mean, Monday is just a big old Excel spreadsheet. But essentially, that's kind of, the structure. So measure, measure, measure. And something that I just want to point out is the fact that you have to try in every one of these channels, and you're going to have to spend money in every one of these channels. So all of a sudden, you see that that funding that you just received is probably not going to cover all of these guys, right? But that's the magic. You guys are the most creative people in the world. You're gonna make it happen. Right. So I gave you some examples of that. One of the things I just want to point out is that search engine marketing, that's the paid version of search, which is Google. One of the amazing things that we found is we don't have to spend a lot of time and effort there. We built our product to manage that, which literally saves us huge amounts of time, and you guys can probably do the same. You can skip the chapter in the book and just use AdBot. Great. Does anyone perhaps have examples of some of these that you guys are running? Nope. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Absolutely. Also, remember, like way back, I'm going to use a very old example. Uber had that like referral campaign. So you could refer somebody. If they then use it, you get cash, or you get a free ride or something like that. That's also for sure. So viral marketing. Anybody else using any of these channels? Ah, yeah, that's great. Advertorials work really. Fair enough. It's actually targeted blogs. Anybody else? Who's offline ad? No startups. Right. Ooh, okay, so here's a tip. Told you I'd give you some practical stuff. Tractor Outdoor has got a platform for small businesses. You can actually go on there. Afterwards, I'll send the link to the guys and they can share it. You upload your artwork onto their system. They will then approve it and run your campaign for free for a month. So I'll make sure to share that. So that you can just see, like test, remember? Everything has to be tested. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. So Tractor Outdoor, remind me to send you a link. Trade shows. How many of you are going to trade shows? All right. Good. Nice. That's definitely. Social media display ads. I mean, no brainer. Probably everyone's doing that, right? What are you finding with, is that working? Isn't it working? Are you measuring it? Great. And how do you see it comparing to search? Brilliant. I feel that's a new category. Okay, interesting. That's really good. Right. So you guys can see that you're going to have to mess around with each one of these channels. You're going to have to put some money in each one. But the most important part is it has to be structured and it has to be measured. That's the most important one. It's not structured and measured. It's just a little bit of a mess. Right. So today I hope you guys have learned that you need to back around and figure out. Is that it? Any questions? Yeah. Absolutely, for sure. We'll definitely do that. That's a really good idea. I'll send it across. Yes. Oh, you. Absolutely. It's going on the website today. Yeah. One of the channels that's in there that we didn't really touch on is sales and business development. One of the places where we scaled the most was through business development and through partners, right? So corporate partners are usually kind of like where you're going to see in your business, it does kind of like this and then that, right? But it takes a very long time to nurture. For us, it took 18 months to get one partner on board. And they're only starting to kind of like pick up now. So it's something that you have to start, like even if you're in pre-seed, start planning who's going to be the partner that you partner with and start negotiating with them. Perfect. Any other questions?
For those different channels that you've mentioned, do you see like groups and clusters of categories that seem to be more effective in B2C space versus B2B versus product, service, like vertical? Because from our side, we do a lot of content marketing and we're in professional services. So essentially, we need a display B2B that we know what we're talking about. But for us to do, for example, if I had to look at offline ads, probably wouldn't be so effective. However, that's an assumption that we haven't tested. Is there any kind of categorization that can maybe speed up someone's testing process here for their business?
So I don't think that I think that there is an opportunity perhaps in any one of these, and if you're not testing them and you're kind of like eliminating some of them because of industry, I think you're probably not going to achieve it. So B2B, for example, in outdoor, what was really interesting for me is that I realized that outdoor is not just the billboards on the highway, it's actually digital screens, and those can be in garages, or it can be in offices, or it can be at trade shows. So I think, and I didn't know that before I explored. So I think, to answer your question, I don't think that you should apply a filter of industry. I would say get creative and find out where your industry is seeing these channels, and then advertise there. It will also make it a lot cheaper.
Okay, thank you. I'm just curious about how do you measure the offline marketing activities that you do, and what type of metrics do you look at so that you can say this was effective or not? Because I assume that if, for example, you do billboards or so forth, you will still be running your online. So how do you know that, actually the spike or this comes specifically from this particular activity? And my second question is, can you give us an idea in terms of the packages that you're offering for AdBot?
Yes, absolutely. So to answer your question, I'm going to take you back to this section over here, because it's a really good question. We don't know. We can't measure actual kind of like billboards, how many people have seen it. We can't measure what is in people's mind and how they make decisions. But what we can measure is we know how many people see the billboard, right? So we'll be able to say traffic or awareness, right? We'll be able to measure that. But when we stack it up against our search, we can then see every time that there is an awareness or a traffic for a billboard, we can see that our numbers within our search actually goes up. And we'll make that assumption, right? So that's one of the things that that's one of the ways that we measure it in management, on management level. The more practical way of measuring it, each billboard has got a QR code on it as you drive along. So you scan, and like I said, not all of it is on the highway. Some of them is in service stations, in town, etc. You then scan the QR code, and we use UTM tags, so it will have a URL with some code or some letters at the end, and essentially that will tell us exactly where the traffic is coming from. So in Google Analytics, GA4, we can actually see where that traffic is coming from. So if you want to get quite technical and details, there's definitely ways to do that. But by comparing your numbers and looking at where you got the awareness, where you got conversions, that's a really good way of actually seeing that happening. So to give you an example, we did a test in the UK. And what we did is we did outdoor. So outdoor specifically on bus stations. And we tracked who was going from outside of London into a place called London Fields. And then we put the outdoor on those bus stations. And then at the market, so it was kind of like London Fields has this massive market. And then in London Fields, we did like a activation of cookies. So what was really interesting is that you could see over that time, and every billboard had a QR code on it. So over that time, we could see kind of like a really big spike in our traffic coming specifically from London. You can see that on Google. But also we could see kind of like around that area, people starting to search for relevant kind of like keywords as well. So you have to unfortunately take bits and pieces, and that's why this format is really important, so that you can have it together. Does that answer your question? Good. Packages. Go to myadbot.com, and it's really easy. For R9 a month, we'll manage your Google and Bing ads. You guys know Bing is a thing now, right? Yeah. Increased market share by 5% in the last 6 months. Unbelievable. Also, if you use Bing, you get credits, and you can exchange it for Xbox games. Boom. That's my mic drop. Any other questions? Yep. Yeah.
And usually they'll be kind enough to tell you that I heard about you from the billboard or from TV or whatever the case may be. And then you can just work
Absolutely.
backwards to track that.
Yeah. So I think that's a really good point. When you have your conversion, it could be a form, could be signing up, downloading an app, somewhere in your user journey. Just ask them, as a completing your profile, where did they hear about you? You can use that data. Right. I hope that was helpful. Oh, one more. Bless you.
Hi. Just curious to know what your efforts towards sales were like, and if you stumbled across or if you were involved in cold calling at some point, and what your results were like. Thanks.
Excellent question. Every startup hates to ask that question, and every startup feels about cold calling like I feel about cold calling. So I was talking about bias, about channels. I'm so biased against cold calling, right? I don't understand where it comes from, probably because I hate it as much, right? Our experience is as follows. So we got to a point where we discovered that digital advertising was not working for us. We needed a different way of doing it. So what we did is we started experimenting with cold emailing. And that has, to a degree, kind of brought in a little bit more leads, which then converted. Now, as you would know, the Poppy Act now restricts that for startups, so it's really difficult. You can only send an email to somebody if you have their consent, their written or verbal consent. So it makes it really, really hard. So what we've done is we've started setting up a little call center. So instead of sending out, I know it sounds overwhelming, but it's not. So instead of sending out an email, we have 2 ladies that all they do during the day is they just call startups and they call small businesses, and they have a conversation with the owner. And the only point they have to do at that point is explain to them how Google Ads works, right? And what's really interesting, since we've done that, everybody will say, "Oh, I'm not really interested, send me an email." We sent them an email, and our demo rates increased by 2,700%. So again, just throwing a little bit of money to a channel, testing it out. We had 2 people calling, and we now know that that's a channel that's going to bring us demos. So once we do a demo, usually in 3 months' time, that person converts. So that was a really good channel for us. So don't be scared about cold calling. And it's because I think, so just go on a little bit of a rant here. I think the reason why it's so weird and bad for us is because everybody does the sales thing, right? Just have a conversation. You're a business owner, you're speaking to another business owner, the professional guys. Have a conversation. Ask them, look, this is what we found. We found the reason why AdBot exists is because we're spending 20 hours a week doing Google Ads instead of running our business. This is obviously not just our problem. It must be a problem for everybody else. And you start having that conversation. You don't have to leave with a lead. You've planted the seed. You've gotten the consent to send an email. Send the email, and then, right. Cool.
Okay, one last one.
Yeah.
Does AdBot work with Google Shopping, or is it exclusively search?
It's exclusively search.
Oh,
So we're a search
bummer.
specialist. We're working on it.
Okay.
No, we are a search specialist. So essentially, every search channel at the moment in Africa, the biggest ones is Google at 92% and losing market share quite quickly, Bing at 5%, and then the rest 1% and lower.
Cool. One more question, then we can wrap it. The
Super.
question's over there.
So I'm not too sure how to frame the question, but something I've seen quite often is small startup teams obviously try and implement some type of component of marketing into their business quite early. And they never really know how to track the attribution on the sales side. And I think there's quite a key decision that needs to be made at some point, are we going to pay a performance marketer to come in and set up the systems to track that attribution? Because obviously knowing where that attribution comes from provides immense value in where to invest. Do you have any views or tips for startups on when to make that change, when to start that journey of getting a performance marketer involved or outsourcing that to another service provider? And also, maybe if you can also touch on the value that knowing where your attribution comes from and how that can drive investment decisions.
Yeah, sure. That's a really good question. I would say, so for us, we only implemented like more robust systems when we had customers. When we hit our 1,000 customer, that's when we started looking at putting in additional systems to track that. Before that, what we did is we used the tools available to us, right? So the reason why we wanted to implement systems and the reason why people implement systems is to make the knowing easy. If you scratch around long enough, you're going to find the answer, right? So it's just to save time. And in the beginning phases, you're kind of like saving a bit of cash, but money is time. So I would say to answer that one question is when you have customers and you can see kind of like, oh wait, here is something that's going to take off, that's when you start implementing stuff. For the rest of it, invest the time and scratch around. Your other point around like how do you know what the attribution is and how do you know what to measure up front? So number one, this book that I referenced will give you a really good kind of like starting point. But essentially like what you're thinking about is like how many people get to know about your product, how many people experience some level of your product, how many actually like look and test, and then how many sell and convert. That funnel will be the same for everyone. And scaling up, I don't know if you guys have read Scaling Up, but Scaling Up is also a book that says just start, right? So you have all the knowledge as a startup and the business owner, you've developed an amazing kind of like product. Measuring marketing is peanuts. So just start. And start with that funnel in mind, thinking about, okay, great, some people have to know about us, they're not going to make a decision immediately, and then we have to get them down the line, and then start figuring out what those are. I didn't know what like PPC is until like later on, and I'm like, oh, this is the thing I was tracking. I didn't call it PPC, but that's it. Well, don't distrust the knowledge and the experience you have within. If you've built a product, you have all the skill sets to start measuring marketing. That it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Good to have you.
Big round of applause.